Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to this short video. So inshallah in this short video, I'm going to discuss the guidelines for translating and adapting tests, which produced by the International Test Commission ITC in 2017. And this is the second edition of the guideline. The first edition has been produced in 2005. So in this short video, we are going to discuss 6 guidelines which involve all the processes in the adapting and translating a test. Okay, the guidelines involve the preconditions, test development, confirmation, administration, score scales and interpretation, as well as documentation. First and foremost, before we conduct or embark into adapting and translating a test, we need to make sure 3 things. First, obtain permission. Second, evaluate constructs overlaps. And third, access linguistic and cultural distance. Okay, first and foremost, when we want to adapt a test, okay, let's say you want to conduct a study, you want to conduct a research, okay, you want to collect data, and you found one particular test, one particular measure which you think applicable, which you think you want to use it in your research. First and foremost, you need to ask for permission. Okay, under the guideline which named as PC1, okay, precondition guideline number 1, the researcher need to obtain the necessary permission from the holder of the intellectual property rights relating to the test before carrying out any adaptation. So we need to ask for permission. The second precondition guidelines involve evaluate the amount of overlap in the definition and content of the construct measured by the test, and the item content in the population of interest is sufficient to the intended use or uses of the score. In the nutshell, this second condition asks the test users, or we who want to adapt, to make sure the construct that we want to measure is equally understood, what we call as overlap, in the culture or in the group that we want to measure. If, say, for example, intelligence, the intelligence developed or conceptualized in the original context must be understood, must be similarly understand by the people that we want to conduct on them. Okay, this is where we want to establish construct equivalence. Okay, what is assessed should be understood in the same way across language and cultural groups. This guideline must be assessed with empirical data along the lines of evidence required in C2. C2 is the guideline for confirmation number 2, which we will discuss later. Okay, the process on how can we gather or develop construct equivalence. Okay, the ITC guidelines have highlighted the process which we can do that. First, we need to recruit experts. So who are expert here? Expert must possess these criteria. Expert of the construct measure. They understand, in that case, intelligence. What intelligence mean? Okay, they understand what the construct mean. They have the knowledge with the culture of the target group. They understand about the intelligence conceptualized in the test, in the scale, and they also understand the culture. Say, for example, you want to adapt an English version of intelligence test in a Malaysian context. So the expert must understand about Malaysian culture. Okay, and the expert also must have familiarity with the language and culture of both the original version of the test as well as the culture of the intended group. So these are the criteria of the expert. Okay, next, in the process of acquiring or developing construct equivalence, we must conduct focus groups or interviews or survey. That's why in the guideline it's highlighted, in order for us to establish construct equivalence, we must conduct or we must produce empirical data through scientific methods. Okay, example of questions on what to ask to the expert, we can ask along this line, does the construct, okay, the intelligence in this case, make sense in the culture of both groups? Okay, the original groups or original cultures that the study or the skill has been established, and the intended group, the target group that we want to conduct. Okay, this is the second guidelines in the preconditions of test adaptation and translation. Okay, the third guidelines, okay, the third precondition guidelines involve minimizing the influence of any cultural and linguistic differences that are irrelevant to the intended uses of the test in the population of interest. Okay, say for examples, there are jargons that we use. Okay, there are certain terminologies or certain aspects which only involve one culture. In this case, the culture of the original version of the test, which are not understood, or people in other culture don't understand them. We need to minimize or exclude all of these terminologies or words that have been using. So here we want to establish methods equivalence. Okay, it relies mainly on qualitative methods, okay, through interviews, through observation. In this aspect, we as test user who want to adapt the test, we need to assess the linguistic and cultural distance between the source and the target language, as well as the cultural groups. Okay, here we want to establish that there is no linguistic, okay, there is no language barriers, there is no specific jargons of a particular culture exists in the test. The selection of test translators in this sense and requires that translator be native to the target language and culture. So we must find or employ translators who are native speakers of Malay language. If take example the intelligent test.